Senegal has been thrown into political tension after President Bassirou Diomaye Faye moved to replace a key ally of Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko as head of the ruling coalition, a decision Sonko's party swiftly rejected as illegitimate. The dispute has exposed a power struggle at the heart of the partnership that brought them into office. The clash has raised fresh questions about how authority is shared between the president and prime minister, leaving their coalition unsettled and the country watching closely for signs of deeper instability. And so at this time, I'm joined by Dr. Abu Bakarr Bah, Presidential Research Professor of Sociology, Northern Illinois University, and of course, in the United States, that's where he is. He joins the conversation to talk about this. Thank you so much, Dr. Bah, for joining us. Okay, so I think we just lost audio with you. If there's a way you can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. So let's just get into the conversation. So now, isn't it a bit too early for this open power struggle between President Faye and Prime Minister Sonko?
Well, yes, it is a little bit too early in office, but they have a long relation. So from that standpoint, it is actually not necessarily too early because, I mean, they have a fairly long relation. Before they, both came to office, and Senegalese politics is also really not too devoid from, I guess, personality politics. I mean, there's a history of personality politics in Senegal as well. So, this may just be part of that.
All right. But, okay. So doesn't this very public clash confirm the long suspected tension between the both of them? Although we've heard, different skirmishes and speculations around a fraught relationship between the both of them. But this seems to be coming to light and might just be confirming those speculations.
Well, look, I think, certainly whenever you have a president and the prime minister, in the open disagreeing or kind of like contesting, it's a little bit concerning. But I think I will say we should not be really too panic here, for Senegal. And I will mention just some few things. The first is that in Senegalese politics, let me backtrack. First, both of these people actually are kind of like for lack of a better word, they are like kind of charismatic kind of figures. They're kind of figures who are out there in the public and almost engaging in kind of like subversive kind of like style. So they do actually have this, both of them, they are coming from actually a kind of like highly public engagement kind of personality in politics, mostly around the youths. And again, I don't want to use the word to have radical ideas, but they do tend to actually have very strong ideas which don't normally typically fit into regular politics. So I can see how that may actually become kind of like a clash between the two. But again, I think so, noting that their personalities and their youthness, I think that's one point to note. The second thing also to note is that, this is, it's kind of like internal politics in the sense that it is about the coalition. It is not necessarily so much about the state per se. Again, it's prime minister and the president. But it has more really to do with the dynamics of their coalition or internal politics within there. Now, in general, when you do have semi-presidential systems where you have a president and a strong prime minister, these kinds of things tend to open. But in the French political system, which Senegal tends to be following here. Usually, it is usual to have a very strong president and a very strong prime minister, and it typically works out. So, again, at this point, I'm not really too much alarmed. There's a lot of mechanisms within Senegalese politics and civil society that is able to handle these kinds of things.
Okay. All right. So stay with me, Dr. Bah. I understand that Nixon Katembo, analyst, Great Lake and East Africa, Johannesburg, an analyst from South Africa, has joined the conversation. Nixon, thank you so much for coming around. And I also understand that Levi Mboushou, who is a political analyst from DR Congo, Kinshasa to be precise, is also on the loop. Guys, thank you so much for coming around to share your thoughts on this. So let me just quickly get Nixon's reaction to this. I mean, listening to Dr. Bah, a strong president, a strong prime minister, but both of them share some sort of political ancestry. Why would there be a falling out now?
I think this is part of the longer processes within the Senegalese political system in a way that, as the doctor said, they ride on a strong popular mandate from a youthful movement to civil society organization, and particularly with the current Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko, who under the previous former President Macky Sall, they made sure that he does not ascend to power and be elected as a president. Remember, Diomaye Faye is sort of a compromise within the political process and arrangement of the political movement that was being led by Ousmane Sonko. So Diomaye Faye also being mentored by Ousmane Sonko. So those political tensions that we see today were likely to rise, and for me, having remotely followed the political processes in Senegal and how things happen, it is not surprising that we see what is happening today. But also, the other aspect that I need to bring in here is the ideological standpoint of both men. Whereas they rose on sort of this anti-France sentiment that we were raising in West Africa vis-a-vis the coup that happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, you see a toned-down stance on the part of Diomaye Faye as the president of Senegal, whereas Ousmane Sonko, on the other hand, is engaging on this geopolitical dynamics within Senegal that have a serious impact on its foreign relations, particularly with France. And as well as when you factor in the Sahel state and Ousmane Sonko's sort of closeness and taking the approach of what the Sahel states have taken with Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. To kind of gain that aspect of political independence from its former colony, the France, having influence in Senegal. And both men, when they come to this particular aspect of the geopolitical dynamics within the region, in particular with France in the region and Senegalese position vis-a-vis France, it becomes a serious question of intense scrutiny on the part of both men on where they align. And this political realignment then filter into how the power struggle dynamics happen in the Senegalese political class currently as we sit between President Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. And I think it's likely to happen. And one can see either 2 or 3 scenarios. The first scenario is for Ousmane Sonko to, as the Prime Minister, to turn down his rhetoric and his position and accept the President Diomaye Faye's leadership, which is likely not going to be the case. The second is for Diomaye Faye as the president to revisit and trace his foot within the political activism movement that they come from, of which he was mentored into by Ousmane Sonko, leading up to him being selected as a compromise candidate because of the political dynamics going towards the elections that ousted the Macky Sall.
Okay.
The third then will be how both men manage Senegalese relation with France vis-a-vis the geopolitical nature of the region and the Senegalese position within the broader context of the politics in West Africa.
All right. Now, let me come to Levi. I mean, you just listened to Nixon say there's got to be some sort of compromises in the path of these two powerful men in Senegal. But then, with their shared political history and the way Faye rose to the presidency, who do you think should hold legitimate supremacy in a country like Senegal, where you have Faye, the president, who is quite vocal, and we also have a Sonko, a prime minister, who is also trying to stamp his authority in the country?
That there is some ideology that should be taken into consideration here. We should not forget, we shouldn't take the text out of the context. Let's situate this in the context within which this duo came to power. We all saw the political engineering that took place at the time when Sonko wanted to become president. The former regime and the system of Macky Sall did not want that to happen. They did everything from intimidation to judicial proceedings to imprisonment. And then at the end of the day, the Constitutional Council and the council charged with validating candidacies for presidency ousted Sonko. Now, there was a smart political move on the part. I think Dr. Bah said that it was some kind of compromise, and then they brought in Diomaye Faye. This was a coalition, do not forget. And I also want to say that in the back scenes, we all heard that in rumors, it was whispered on the back streets of Dakar, that there were negotiations that happened between Macky Sall and his government before they agreed that they were going to concede defeat and then allow, because we all know how it happens in Africa, allow in quotes the duo or the coalition Faye and Sonko to come to power. Now that they came, my take is that Diomaye Faye should not lean on political ideology, on any kind of political morality, because that would not happen here if he pushes aside the realpolitik. He should take into consideration facts on the ground. Look at the kind of alliance that exists between Sonko and the person that Diomaye ousted in favor of the lady he appointed as leader or coordinator of the coalition. In my take, this should not have happened given the conditions under which Diomaye came into power. It's true that there would be tendencies, subtle tendencies, for Sonko to undermine Diomaye's authority at the helm of the presidency. But then Diomaye should be very tactful in the way this happens. This was a coalition, they won popular acclaim at the time they rose to power, to the head of the executive. If care is not taken, the popular acclaim they had, the charm they succeeded to instill in the collective mind of the people would be their own undoing if this is not managed properly. I say again, I always say it everywhere I go, in politics, 1 + 1 is never 2. So they should be mindful how they tread. But then Sonko too should be mindful of how he tries to weigh in, because mind you, this would not only be a battle between Sonko and partisans, or ally and partisans. We are having a situation where there is a rift, there is a splinter in the coalition that brought these two to the helm of power. Already there were whispers as to a possible eventual rift, political rift between the two. So my take is that Diomaye Faye should be subtle, should be politically intelligent as to how he is treading on subtle waters. It doesn't take anything from his presidency if he gives Ousmane Sonko his place, if the two come to work together. We've heard foreign correspondents say that there could be options like Nixon outlined, and that one of them would be that the two reconcile and then they come to terms and they agree on how they are going to run the country. Oh, I'm sorry about that. On how they are going to run the country, but then they should note that the country comes ahead of them. The country comes before partisan inclinations.
Okay.
And this should be taken perfectly into consideration before anything or any move is done.
Okay. Now, Dr. Bah, so we see a president who removed, what's her name now? Aissatou Mbouj, who is someone described as a very strong ally of Sonko, and he replaced her with Aminata Toure, who he believes is his ally. Now, could this move be driven by fears of internal maneuvers that might undermine Faye's presidency or future ambitions?
So look, I actually see this as purely an internal power struggle within the party. I don't really see this as a crisis of the state. Now, granted, of course, it can. I mean, whenever you have a president and a prime minister, it can lead to that. But let me make two kinds of points here, which I think builds on what have been said before. The one is that really, I mean, we should not really overread into this because, again, I don't want to speak too nicely of Senegal. I don't have to live there, so but Senegal has a unique place in African politics. Senegal has a far much more level of civility and rule of law compared to most African countries. Senegalese politics doesn't really easily degenerate. Of course, I mean, we do have street violence. I mean, those things are important to note. But in Senegal, one thing that we know for sure is that the military will never be involved in politics, which is very important. Number two, we know that eventually the judicial system will work. I mean, the Senegalese judicial system is not very, very bad. Again, I know that they have done a lot of shitty things, but ultimately, I think they do have a capacity to actually rule in some of these things. So, and the third thing I want to just say on that level is that Senegalese civil society is fairly mature. Again, in the context of African politics. So I'm not really very, very worried here in terms of what this will actually mean for Senegalese politics. Yeah. Now, the issue here, I think, as my good friend here from South Africa was saying, is that these kinds of, infighting here can actually undermine both of them, undermines the movement and the kind of, ideologies or populist kind of politics which they stand for, and it can actually open opportunities for other coalition leaders or other persons. And ultimately, I think the real shame will be that if they are not really able to implement their agenda, because again, they run on a populist agenda, and that is really what they have been doing. So if they become also focused on infighting and really they cannot deliver their populist agenda for the youths, then really that becomes a shame. And I think it becomes really, it will lead to their downfall, both of them. But I think for now, I think we should not really overread too much into what is happening here.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bah, for saying that. But then I'm sure Senegalese or citizens in Senegal will be very, very concerned about how this would eventually pan out, because it's probably, giving or oozing some sentiments that there might just be some sort of instability in the country if this is not settled at the end of the day. So I come to Nixon and ask, now, by replacing Mbouj with his own campaign coordinator, I'm talking about the president now replacing Mbouj with Aminata Toure, isn't the president signaling an attempt to tighten his grip on party structures and power as a president?
One of the critical aspects in democratic politics, particularly the system within the political party, somehow always dictate and inform how government policies are going to happen and how the leader at the helm of the state is going to act in a way. So if you look at those changes, particularly with the replacement of this particular coalition leader, it sent a message, as you correctly out said, but also it comes with its own problems that then lead to government instability in a way, because because of those internal power struggle that emerges by the replacement of a leader. We first hear, for example, in South Africa, where former President Thabo Mbeki removed his deputy president, and which kind of ignited the chain of events that led to the Mbeki's ouster. Hence, I go back to my point to say that both men have to be really careful on how they handle the political environment within Senegal. As the doctor said, this is one of the stable countries in West Africa and much on the African continent. And therefore, their political differences have to be managed in a way that does not destabilize the entire country at a state level, at the institutional level, but also navigating the ideological stance within the broader political movement and the coalition to the detriment of the standing of Senegal in the international community. And for me, I think that is very important, because what we saw in the case of Africa, we saw a chain reaction of events coming up, and since then it set a precedent that today in South Africa there have been a subsequent event where the president does not finish his second term immediately after the elective conference of the governing African National Congress. Will this happen in Senegal? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but at least one can deduce from a fact that this could set a precedent, which then will have an impact on the Senegalese politics in the long run.
Okay, so Levi, let's look at this. Now, President Diomaye Faye is 45 years, and Ousmane Sonko, who is Prime Minister, is 51 years. Now, we also have Macky Sall was ousted from power, 63 years, will probably be somewhere now laughing, his arts off at, the political gibberish or the infighting that we're seeing between these two strong people currently in Senegal. Do you think probably age and experience can be telling on their political choices?
Now, yes, it's true that these leaders, particularly seat-tight politicians across Africa, including Macky Sall, would be looking down at them and trying to laugh and then say that they have always been right when they clamor for the aged and the politically mature, so to speak, to hang on to power. And so this doesn't play well for the youth, and this doesn't send across an interesting message across the continent. Why? Because like Nixon said, I'm going to paraphrase him, Senegal within the region and across Africa has always stood up as a beacon of democratic righteousness. They are that example of democracy. They have been quite exemplary in holding free and fair elections. I think it was only in the era of Macky Sall where he wanted to twist and cut corners a little. But then he'll be saying now that, oh, these are children, these are political babies. They don't know what they are doing. So it is in the interest, not only for Senegal, but the world is watching them. They came up to power and everybody was happy that at last a cream of the younger generation has come to take the command baton. And so it is in their interest to defend that, because the world is watching. The youth across the globe are watching. When they rose to power, across the continent, from Congo-Brazzaville to Cameroon to Equatorial Guinea to Uganda to other parts of Africa where we have nonagenarians wanting to cling to power and only want to leave power and go down to the grave. Now, these people are there. What are they telling us? They shouldn't allow the older generation to laugh at us. So yes, it's in the interest for these people to come together and put the interest of country over politics. Of course, I understand the intricacies that comes with managing parties and politics, and trying to put a clear dichotomy between the party and the state. And this is a hot potato to handle. I pray and wish that these people handle it in such a way that we, the youth, or the youth in Senegal, are not a ridicule and a source of shame for the older generation.
All right, Nixon, don't you think that Sonko will feel betrayed at this point, given how instrumental he was to Faye's 2024 victory?
I think the tension already indicates to that aspect that Sonko might feel betrayed. at the same time, we have another aspect that President Diomaye Faye might feel undermined by the Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. And hence, I'm saying that a political compromise is necessary in this case. I cannot say enough to reiterate that point because, as my previous colleague said, indeed, it sends a set of signals of a lack of capacity of handling power when you have it, when you're in power. But when you are advocating for change, in the political movement, as President Macky Sall, they don't seem to be showing the same rig of handling power within the current context when they are in power. And that sent, for me, it's a dangerous precedent that should be avoided by the two men at all costs, and making sure that Senegal does not become a laughing stock just for the benefit of the political interests of the two men.
Okay. Now, Dr. Bah, so this is a question I want to ask you. Now, we understand how Faye was there when it comes to political strength, pulling that weight. And I'm even talking about, I'm talking about the Prime Minister now, rather. Of course, Ousmane Sonko, how instrumental and politically relevant it was to help President Faye get into power. So can President Faye govern effectively without Sonko, who still commands a strong party and significant popular legitimacy?
So there are really two things here that are, kind of connected. One is just the French political, semi-presidential system, which kind of Senegal, tends to follow. And the other one is actually, the populist nature of both of these people and how they came to power. So I think and I think there's complications on both sides because from the French political system, in principle, I mean, the Prime Minister actually do have significant powers. Of course, there's a president. So it's a kind of like a very delicate, kind of balance there. And that will, of course, will have to play out within the parliament, and because again, you have to have a majority. You have to have enough votes in the parliament to be able to to put a prime minister. So I think you have to understand the complexities of the French semi-presidential system, which is not a purely presidential system or a parliamentary system. Now, on the more, I guess, political aspect of it again, both of these people actually are the product of more or less a similar kind of movement, and they are a byproduct of that. Now, I think the element of the youth and all those things. I mean, to me, I mean, these are grown men enough. I don't consider really to be children, so I do think that they have had enough experience to govern. They just have to do it right. But here's a central point here. As a kind of like an internal struggle, one is that either A, one of them lose, or B, they both demise, and it opens a window for another third force. Now, and there are actually people, again, as the colleague from Kinshasa was saying, I mean, maybe the older guys, I mean, Macky Sall and these other people and the like. So I think there is that kind of, risk there for them. But this is mostly a risk for them as politicians, in my view, more than actually it is a risk for Senegal. I'm really not very worried about Senegal per se, at least not at this point, But I think for them as political figures, I think there's some they have to do their calculations, much more right. And one other thing to also note is that Senegalese politics has always produced these kinds of figures. I mean, going back to Senghor, I mean, less of Abdou Diouf, but certainly, Abdoulaye Wade, I mean, and Macky Sall to some extent. So, these kinds of personalities are really not extremely new in Senegalese politics, and maybe, I mean, you just have to go back to Abdoulaye Wade and see how he played out. So I guess to sum up your question, I think they have to be cognizant how this will play within the movement and which kind of doors it may open for other people.
Okay, all right. So, Levi, at the center of these two elephant fights is the people, and these people form the fulcrum of the coalition party that brought both the president and the prime minister into power. And analysts are warning that losing pastors' cooperation will make it difficult for President Faye to govern. And that might also affect the coalition party's future ambitions politically. That's as a party. And that would also affect Faye's that's his political ambitions or his plans for future elections. Now, doesn't it seem as though this might happen, probably a collapse of a Faye government and a coalition in power if these tensions continue to grow?
Exactly. You just hit the hammer on the nail. If things were to continue this way, then we're all going to be heading towards a dissolution of this Sonko-Faye coalition. If things don't stop at this point, then we will be heading for everything collapsing like a pack of cards. The people rallied behind them. Let's remember that in the beginning, it was Sonko who was in the limelight. Then it's not like Faye came and stole the show, but circumstantially, Faye was pushed to the fore as some kind of compromise. Let him not forget that it's because of the circumstances in which they found themselves that wanting to oust Sonko, they played a smart political move, and Sonko rallied. I remember one thing that was said, being chanted at the time of this coalition. They said, Sonko, c'est Faye, Sonko, c'est Diomaye, Diomaye, c'est Sonko. As if to say that Sonko and Diomaye were all one. And the people took this in sloganeering and then pushed to oust the system. Then these same people, they won the popular votes, they had popular acclaim, as I said before.
Okay.
At this point, if care is not taken, there would be some kind of political divorce between Sonko and Diomaye. And I bet you that if Sonko were to pull out of this, let's not forget the power, the political power that he wields. It would be death at a funeral for President Diomaye Faye. So he wants to be very careful how he treads on this.
All right, so even as we wrap things up, Nixon, it's been said that the opposition might try to cash in on this to further polarize these two strongmen in Senegal. What should be the best way out to resolve this crisis? Just in about a minute.
I think the best way out is for both men to sit down, go back on the drawing board on what brought them to power and what they seek to achieve for the Senegalese youth, but also the country at large. And what are the political and the economic achievements that they have done so far, and what do they seek to achieve going forward? And draw a map, a roadmap rather, for their political process that bring about stability for both men, in which they will work hand in hand for the betterment of Senegal in the future, and make sure that the youthful presidency leadership that they brought in is galvanized in making sure that they hand over the mantle of leadership to those who are following them, and making sure that they set an example for Senegal going forward.
Thank you so much, Nixon Katembo, analyst at Great Lake and East Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa. It was nice talking to you at this time. And of course, Dr. Abu Bakarr Bah, Presidential Research Professor of Sociology at Northern Illinois University. Thank you so much. And Levi Mboushou, a political analyst from Kinshasa, DR Congo. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for talking to us on the show.